Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of the Launch Over podcast on the Without Your Head network. I'm Sophia Cacciola.
And I am Michael J. Epstein, and we are here on a couch in Hollywood. In the background, you may hear the pitter-patters of our third semi-silent host, King Ghidorah the Dog.
He's very excited to wander. We don't come into this room very often, and so he likes to wander when we get in here.
We make it special for him every time we record the podcast. And we're here this week with our good friend Jason Horton. Hello.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. And we're going to talk quite a lot about what I would call the dynamic and frustrating world of filmmaking today. I think that's the way I would put it. Would you call it that?
Yeah, I'd say it's a very frustrating and difficult time, and we'll definitely get into that.
Yeah, and that will be an exciting, informative discussion. But before we do that,
we're going to talk about what we've been watching. So I guess I'll start because I'm excited to talk about this for some reason. When the Batman trailer came out, I was like, I got to watch Twilight because all the fanboys were so mad that Robert Pattinson is the Batman. And, and Twilight is like the Nickelback of movies. Like everybody wants to like rag on it and hate it so much. And I started to feel like maybe it's just because it's for girls and like people hate stuff that's made for women. And so I decided I better watch this so I have an informed opinion on Twilight. And I'm a big vampire fan. I love Hammer horror vampires from the 70s. John Roland, like we made a vampire movie. So I felt ready to embrace Twilight. And it's okay. It's not a bad movie. The glitter thing that everybody's so mad about is just kind of a bad CG effect. I wish they figured out how to do that in camera. The coloring is horrible on this whole movie, but that's kind of like that early 2000s.
You say movie, but you're talking about like five
I liked
movies?
it enough. I watched all of them. I thought it was almost like a TV series. I liked it enough just to keep going. Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart are fine. They're both they have gone into indie movies. They're decent actors. It's kind of melodramatic and fatalistic, but I think that's what being a teenage girl is like. I was one once. So I think they're fine movies. They're not great. They're not like Shakespeare. I don't understand the hate for them other than just straight up misogyny. Also, Catherine Hardwicke was the director of the first one, female director. There's a great article with her where she talks about how she was sort of asked back for the second movie, but they wanted a really fast turnaround, less than a year. And she thought she couldn't deliver a good movie in that time. And so they got the guy from American Pie to direct it. And then all the rest, and that one's definitely the worst one. All the rest of them directed by dudes. They never asked her back, even though she created $1 billion empire with this movie. It's ridiculous. So there's an article. She never got another huge big budget movie again. She's done a bunch of indie stuff.
And she was like a art designer or something. She worked in film prior, doing something else. I think she was like a production designer or something like that. I might be making that up. I don't know. Jason, have you seen the Twilight movies?
I have seen the Twilight movies. I honestly feel about the same as Sophia, at least with the first one. I think it's fine. I might go as far as to call it mediocre, but it definitely, I had no hate for it.
Right.
I thought the second one was incredibly campy to the point where I was entertained. I saw it at a midnight show. And then was it the last one? They split into two. Those were just bug nuts. They were crazy.
Yeah, they had the werewolves against the Vatican vampires, and it was just a big showdown of vampires and werewolves, and it was kind of interesting. It felt like a TV show at that point.
Yeah. And aside, I think Catherine Hardwicke had some interesting visuals in the first one, but I thought the sequels got really kind of flat looking.
Yeah, the coloring in all the movies is so that blue-gray color of the early 2000s. And it just looks so bad now. We didn't know how to color digital film or something. I actually don't even know if they probably weren't even shot digitally. We were just doing digital coloring, and it just nobody had it figured out yet.
I think that was the era when they introduced digital coloring, and they're like, look, we can do all kinds of crazy things, so we'll just do those crazy things, even though they in retrospect look terrible.
We've actually been watching tons of franchises, and this is a segue into...
I just want to say something about Catherine Hardwicke. She is a production designer, and the reason I knew that, which I had forgotten, is that she was at the Freaked screening we saw because she did the production design for the movie Freaked.
Yeah.
Which, have you seen Freaked?
Okay. I have, the Alex
Winter movie.
Right?
Yeah. So she was actually at that doing the Q&A and talking about it, and they were like, thanks for coming, even though you're much more famous than us now. Like you're much bigger.
From Twilight, yes, but like, why hasn't she been offered like one of the big Marvel movies? You know, like $1 billion movie, like, and no huge follow up for her, like some indies that she's had to struggle to get funding for. Like, it drives me mad.
What was her breakout? I forgot. Like before Twilight.
She had some like girl movies. Hold on.
Lords of Dogtown. 13.
Lords of Dogtown.
13 was a big breakout. Yeah.
I'm looking at her IMDb here.
So she had like the teen kind of girl movies.
Yeah, I haven't seen Lords of Dogtown, but I've heard it's fun.
Good.
I've heard it's a fun movie. Yeah. So anyway, we'll have to check that out and get back to everyone.
It's just more. We'll link to this great interview I read with her about her struggles post Twilight, like, and not being asked back, and like not getting one of the big Marvel movies or something.
And check out her amazing production design on Freaked.
Freaked.
True. I mean, like that sounds sarcastic. But
no, the production design is the best part of Freaked.
It's really incredible in Freaked. Yeah, really good.
I was segueing into the Bourne movies because Michael and I were like, let's watch a bunch of crappy franchises for pandemic. And so we watched the Bourne movies, and they are terrible. They're really bad. And the coloring is the same as Twilight, that super bland gray, blue, like early 2000s garbage coloring. It's horrible. That's about all I have to say about the Bourne movies.
I can't really say I was a fan either. Yeah. We've watched...
I love shitty spy movies. Like, that's another genre I just like will inherently love, and they're just not good. They are like 10 minutes of story across 4 2-hour-long movies.
Yeah.
We didn't see the fifth one.
Well, you know what really drove me nuts about those? The first one was a little bit better with it, but then when Greengrass started directing them, and I usually like, I don't have no problem with handheld or Verite style, but it was so shaky and so quickly edited. I was like, what? I couldn't tell what was going on.
Yeah.
It made me feel like an old dude, like these damn kids and their quick cuts.
I thought it was like...
It ended up looking amateur, I thought.
Yeah.
I called it a John Cassavetes trying to make a action movie. Like, it basically just felt like they didn't, it was very improv-y feeling almost, like in terms of shooting and everything. And I know that was the goal. Obviously, that was a choice, but it just didn't really work. Yeah.
No.
I didn't say. I remember watching the fight scene between Matt Damon and, I forget his name. Anyway, the bad guy. And I kept thinking there's a good fight in there somewhere. You just can't see it through the shaky camera and the quick editing.
They tried really hard.
Definitely true. Did not enjoy those. Anyway, we don't have to talk about them really.
Back to girl movies. I finally saw Valley Girl.
The original.
Nick Cage,
Okay.
We haven't seen the musical yet. Yeah, there's a new musical that's...
Yeah.
I don't think I need to see that. But Valley Girl, I love. The music in Valley Girl is great. It's like 80s, like kind of new wavy. I thought it was awesome. I also like, because it's been hyped up as a movie where, the girls talk all stupid. It's not that different than how people talk now, other than a few like words that were made up for the movie. But as far as saying like every other word and stuff, it just I didn't even notice it until I remembered that was a big complaint about those sorts of women.
Yeah, I think the movie is really fun for living in Los Angeles, because it gives you a snapshot of what streets were like at the time. And they go, because they live in the valley obviously, so it's like a big deal that they're like, we're gonna do something like dangerous and bad, we're gonna go to Hollywood.
They go to the Sunset Strip. And he goes to Hollywood High. It's so cute. Like I loved seeing like the bar scenes and stuff from the 80s. It was really cute.
So we live in, apparently I guess maybe we do, but we live in the scary part of town.
It still is.
Well, I do.
Yeah. We all live in the scary part of town.
Right.
What I found related to Valley Girl is that Deborah Foreman, who is the lead in Valley Girl, somehow kept appearing in things I watched this week. I don't know. I didn't do it on purpose, but I happened to turn on April Fool's Day, which I had not seen since I was a kid. Do you remember April Fool's Day? Have you?
I've seen it, but I couldn't tell you a damn thing about it.
I can't really complain about it without spoiling it, but it's it's a really standard like high school and then there were none Agatha Christie kind of thing, where this rich girl brings her friends to like a mansion on a island, and then they start getting killed off. But the twist in it is so dumb.
I remember the twist.
Yeah, the twist is so stupid that which I knew already. I had seen it already, so I knew. But just watching it again, I'm like, this twist is so dumb. And I went and read like a bunch of reviews of it, and people were like, Like, this movie was okay, but fuck the ending. Like, it's so stupid. Anyway, April Fool's Day. If you're into that kind of, because we made a movie. Our first feature film was called 10, and it was our goal was to kind of deconstruct the archetypes in that type of Agatha Christie story, and then there were none, 10 Little Indians kind of story, where you have a bunch of archetypal characters who show up together, and then you're kind of dealing with why they're who they are and how they interact, and then they get killed off one by one. And ours was kind of a meta version of that, I guess, which was back before we had any idea how to make films. So it has its ups and downs.
We're thinking like the rights are going to come back to us in the next few years to that movie, and we're thinking of just like recutting it and like trying to see what we can do with it now, 10 years later.
Yeah. I've done that with some movies.
Yeah. But April Fool's Day is very similar to that in a lot of ways. So that I turn that on. And then I also wanted to watch Waxwork 1 because we had watched Waxwork 2 recently. And so I flipped on Waxwork, and lo and behold, Deborah Foreman's in it. And I didn't even realize that because she plays a character who's in Waxwork 2, but played by a different actor. So I was like, wait a second, she wasn't in the other one. What's going on? And Waxwork is like the most full moon movie that's not made by Full Moon ever. Have you seen the Waxwork films?
I have. Yeah, I've seen both.
Yeah.
Or was there a third?
I think there's only two. Or I only know of two. Yeah.
And
I've
it's seen
like
those.
Somehow I really, it has a lot of really fun ideas, but it just kind of fell flat a little for me. But I don't know. Did you enjoy them?
I haven't seen them since I was a kid. I loved them as a kid, but I was 12 years old, so
Right.
I found a lot of stuff that I've revisited from that time period where I just thought it was brilliant. It's not.
The movie I'm most angry I never heard of before, and it showed up on Prime this week, is Vibes. Are you familiar with this movie? It's Jeff Goldblum, Cyndi Lauper, and Peter Falk.
Yes.
It's amazing. Like, it's really good. Nobody ever told me. I'm so mad. Nobody ever told me about it. This should be like a cult midnight classic that I've been watching my whole life. But like, Jeff Goldblum and Cyndi Lauper are psychics, and Peter Falk is a con man who like gets them to go to, is it Ecuador they go to?
I can't remember, but they're looking for like this city of gold, essentially.
Yep.
Yes, and using their psychic abilities to find this lost city of gold.
It's kind of like a Romancing the Stone kind of thing.
Exactly,
like
Romancing the Stone.
A lot more comedy. Yeah, I remember it as a kid, but I haven't seen it.
It just showed up on Prime. It's so fun.
Yeah, I might put that on.
Yeah, I'd seen that a long time ago as well, and watching it again, I was like, it's one of those things where you're like, I remember this being really fun, but am I going to like it now? But I did.
I want to see Cyndi Lauper in so much more stuff, and she does like a hilarious 40s like noir accent. It might be her voice, I'm not even sure, but her like noir accent is so cute. I loved it.
And that led me to watching the first Columbo movie, Prescription Murder, because I love Peter Falk, and I've always loved Columbo. I would say Peter Falk is like one of my favorite actors ever. And on IMDb TV through Amazon, they have the first couple of seasons of Columbo for free with ads.
Oh, cool.
And so they had the pilot. It was kind of the pilot. I think it was originally just a TV movie, and then they repackaged it as kind of like the first episode of the show when they brought the show on. But so 1968, Prescription Murder. And Columbo, it was an okay movie, but I love him. He's so funny. And the premise of Columbo is they call it like a reverse mystery or something, where basically the audience sees the crime committed in the beginning. So we know what happened actually, and then we watch as Peter Falk as Columbo tries to kind of unravel it and solve the case. So we know in advance like what actually happened, and then we see how he kind of pieces it together. And Peter Falk plays that character. The Columbo character is like kind of he pretends to be kind of bumbling and like not really too smart, but in reality he's really just kind of like playing psychological games with everybody the whole time. It's a really fun kind of interaction, really good dialogue writing. So I enjoyed that, even though it's the mystery part is it gets a little goofy at times, but
it went on, it got really. Well, it was rote from the beginning, but it got really rote as it went on.
Yeah.
My mom loved Columbo. She loved Peter Falk.
Yeah.
Like anything with Peter Falk, she'd watch. And my mom was very like conservative, just watch big stuff, but she would watch like the Cassavetes stuff. Because he was in it.
Nice.
Yeah, he's so good in all the Cassavetes movies. So he's just. I mean, Wings of Desire is one of my favorite movies.
I think that was one of the first movies Michael and I bonded on was Wings of Desire.
Yeah.
It's like we didn't know anybody else that had ever even seen it.
Yeah.
That's a classic. I love, we didn't watch this week, but there's a movie called Weekend Murders that's actually kind of ties in almost like the April Fool's Day thing and the Columbo thing, because it's that's King Ghidorah the dog coughing in the background. Poor little guy. But Weekend Murders is a British film that's a bunch of rich people go to a house to deal with an inheritance case, and they start getting killed off, and there's kind of like this bumbling policeman who's actually like a secret genius solving the case. So it's totally a ripoff of a Columbo kind of character, which probably comes from something else. I'm not familiar with the history of that type of that archetype, but Weekend Murders is really fun as well if anybody catches that. So we also watched Cinematic Void, which is a Los Angeles film screening series, I guess I would call it.
Yeah.
Hasn't been able to run screenings at theaters during the pandemic, but they've been doing some online screenings, especially of rare movies that are not really available in any other way. And they ran this week the Octagon with Chuck Norris, which is both an amazing and a terrible movie. I don't. Have you seen the Octagon?
Yeah, I have. Yes.
The Octagon. It's pretty clearly my favorite part about it is that pretty clearly they made a movie and they were like, this movie kind of sucks and doesn't make any sense. What if we add like echoey voiceover where Chuck Norris is thinking about things, and then we have him talk constantly about ninja, like just like this voiceover. He's just like, ninja. This must be the work of ninja, but ninja have been illegal for 300 years, so it can't be. But it is ninja. And then they make the villain his brother. He's like, that guy's my brother. Like it's clearly not in the original movie that they shot, but like they just add this voiceover later. So I don't know. I had fun watching that. It was terrible. It was the most canon films, most non-canon films canon film I've ever seen because ninja are the staple of canon. Canon. I'm sure you've seen the American Ninja and/or Ninja series. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them all.
Yeah. like any good film buff.
Right. I went through my Chuck Norris and martial arts phase too.
Right. I was kind of wondering what happened to like the Michael Dudikoff, Chuck Norris fighting ninja kind of movies, but maybe they'll come back.
Speaking of canon, we watched a documentary that I just came across on Amazon called The Hollywood Banker, and it's by the daughter of
Franz Hoffman.
Yeah, Franz Hoffman. Basically, he met Dino De Laurentiis and started financing films through his bank, and basically established pre-sales. So he would go to Cannes and he would talk to distributors and pre-sell titles based on who was in it and who the director was. And and then he would get his bank to front the money for the production. And he would go to production, he would hang out with the stars. So it was a really fascinating documentary because basically he established this whole way of working where you get the money ahead of time. And they even did the Pirates movie from Polanski, which like bombed horribly. And there's an interview with him from the time where he's like, well, the bank doesn't lose money because we pre-sold it. So he's like, even though it was kind of a flop, like the bank is fine, But
that entire model that, people think of as like the AFM model or the Cannes model where titles are pre-sold and then a bank puts up the money based on those pre-sale contracts.
All started with him.
All was him, really.
And he worked with Canon. That was like why it came into that. And I think it's actually a great doc to watch with Electric Boogaloo, the Canon Films documentary about like their crazy pyramid scheme of how it all fell down. And it kind of took down Franz Hoffman as well. Even though he wasn't involved in like their crazy pyramid scheme, he tried to cut out of the situation, and the bank still went ahead with it, even though he said not to go ahead. And then it all kind of fell out, and he had to quit doing it. But he had like a good 20 years. Like he financed like Dances with Wolves and like all these big hits, Terminator, big hits.
And these are movies that had trouble getting financing otherwise. And because he would go to Cannes and do all the travel. He knew all the distributors, so he would be able to intelligently understand like what the contracts meant and whether the money was really going to show up. And other banks were afraid because you could walk in with a piece of paper that says like, oh yeah, here's a pre-sale from a distributor in Eastern Europe, but like if the bank doesn't know what that means or who those people are, it's just not going to work. And he knew who the reliable distributors were. He knew who was going to come through with the money later.
Right, because he went and he socialized and he did the legwork. Very interesting way of working, and like building a new way of working in the 80s with like different kinds of theater models and straight to video models. Which
And so-
maybe brings us into some of the stuff
And
we're going to talk about.
we'll tie that into what we talk about later. Yeah, because this is really, I think it, again, these models were new at that time, and now things have really changed because those models are almost certainly gone in a lot of ways.
Because this doc is very niche, I think. But I think if you are interested in film distribution and film financing and that kind of the history of that world, I found it very fascinating.
Oh, there's one more movie I wanted to talk about. We couldn't attend Genre Blast this year. It was one of our favorite festivals that we love to attend every year. But what they did, which was a really fun thing, was show a couple of the movies by live streaming from inside the theater. So it's not the best quality, but they basically like held up a phone inside the theater so you could see like the audience. You could see like the audience watching, with the movie. So I got to watch two of the movies, Greywood's Plot, which I had already seen actually, which was a really fun. It's definitely worth checking out, and that one is out now, so you can see it. And then the second one was a movie called Forced to Fear, which was basically like I would call it like a 90s action movie, very much in the Full Moon Empire type of film line. And so that was, it fit. It felt like I was watching a VHS of this movie, which is really like consistent with the experience of what the movie is. It's kind of like that type of like heavy synth continuous electronic score.
The music was great.
Yeah, music was really good. So that was a really fun thing. That was part of an experience of being at Genre Blast without actually being at Genre Blast. And even though the quality isn't great, there's something fun in a way about watching it,
basically
like
pirated.
seeing like you're inside the theater. Yeah, like it was like a cam version of the thing. So that was cool. I actually did get to see Forced to Fear again after.
I think he took pity on you, right?
Yeah, he took pity on me. He's like, I know you watched this, but you should watch the real version. And then I did watch it again, and I enjoyed it again. So are there any films that you saw recently that you would like to add or talk about?
Have you guys seen the Charlie Kaufman's one on Netflix? I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
We have not yet. We actually don't have Netflix.
I've seen it very divisive on Facebook as far as people loving it or hating it or turning it off.
I'm a little more middle of the road on it. I enjoyed it. I honestly didn't quite understand it my first viewing. And then I watched it again, then I did get it, and I enjoyed it quite a bit more. But I liked it.
Yeah, I've heard.
I can definitely see how somebody would say it was overly pretentious or whatnot, but
Right.
I love pretentious movies.
I mean, have they seen
Yeah.
a Charlie Kaufman movie?
I know. Well, like,
I know, that's, yeah.
people were comparing it
Totally.
to Schenectady or whatever.
Schenectady.
Yeah, I did not like that movie.
Yeah.
You liked it though, right?
I didn't.
No,
No, I didn't.
okay, neither of us liked it.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay.
It's very boring.
I really love Being John Malkovich and adaptation.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, and Eternal Sunshine is great as well.
Yeah.
But Synecdoche was like it felt like you were actually inside Charlie Kaufman's mind. Like you were really experiencing what he thinks of, and I think it was the first film he directed as well.
Maybe.
And so it was like it was too pure a version of Charlie Kaufman, I would say. Like they gave you too much of him, and so the movie is just like a spiraling.
It's a mess.
I mean, it's intentionally like a spiraling disaster mess of like a creator trying to create and show truth, but in order to show truth, having to ever make it larger and larger to the point where you're like, I'm building a world inside of the world, but that world has to grow to the size of the actual world in order to be representative of the world, if that makes sense. It's
Right.
like a self-perpetuating, like continuous spiraling mess of growth. So I don't know. Anyway, so what was the new one? I mean, I don't know if you can even talk about what it was about.
I probably shouldn't even brought that one up because you can't really say much about it without
Right.
The spiral.
ruining it. Yeah, but I mean, it's really good performances, really well shot. You could say that. There's a good generic synopsis.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope when we have a Netflix someday,
We'll probably do
try
a free
it out.
trial again at some point.
Just doesn't really cater to us. We have Shudder and Amazon, and I have a Full Moon subscription now, which was kind of free in a way. But yeah, and we also, we have Kanopy through the LA Library. I don't know if for anybody who lives in Los Angeles, and I think, is it still in New York? I'm not sure.
It was in New York. I don't know.
Kanopy has some incredible films, including a lot of Criterion films and other.
A lot of art house. Like they have a whole A24 section.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah,
You can
so
sign
we
up
do
through your library
yeah,
card.
get a library card and get Kanopy. And they also they also have Hoopla through the library, and that also does have a bunch of cool stuff. So yeah, so those two, and we have plenty of options for watching things at this
Yeah.
point.
I think the problem I've had watching new stuff too since the pandemic, I'm a real theater person. I love going to the theater to see things, and and I still was watching a lot of stuff at home, but I don't know, it almost doesn't, right now anyway, I just don't feel like, it's hard for me to put on something new right now.
Yeah, we were kind of like that for a long time. I mean, I guess we still are to a degree. Like you, we were at the movie theater 3-4 times a week easily.
Yeah.
And now it's obviously we haven't been since March. So we're very lucky today to have our friend Jason Horton here to talk about some of the projects that he's been working on, including something that Sophia was involved with. And I really wanted to have Jason on because a lot of us who are involved in filmmaking are dealing, I mean, it's kind of like the world, I guess, at this point, right? Every day it feels like there's something new and different, and like everything you've planned for and everything you've kind of set up your life for is now like on the wrong path. Like you've made the wrong choices for the last, period of time, thinking that things would be a certain way, and now they've shifted to something else. So, that's kind of like the story in filmmaking. And I think Jason has done a really incredible job moving very dynamically and swiftly within that landscape and making decisions to do different kinds of creative projects. And not only that, but has shared a lot of advice and stories about that process. And I think that's been really valuable. You run some Facebook groups kind of, and you do these video, I would call it like a video advice column. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah. So that, that kind of stuff. And so I'd love to talk about some of these things. So I guess let's first start. You've been doing a lot of documentary projects. That's been kind of a shift. And I would love to hear about what made you make the shift a little bit from narrative to doing a lot more documentary work. Yeah.
So I've been a narrative filmmaker. Like just that's all I wanted to do. And I did it for, 15 years. Like just, horror movies, comedies, dramas, whatever. I really liked narrative. I liked watching documentaries, but I had no real drive to do it myself, to make them. It seemed like I had this kind of like arrogant young filmmaker thing where that's not real filmmaking. You're not, but I of course I was wrong, but I had no real interest in it. And then, like you were saying, the industry it keeps changing. I was doing narrative films and I was being hired to direct a lot of these narrative films, and they were low budget stuff, all under like $100,000, but they were making money, like quite a bit. And it's not that this is just all about money, but you need to make enough to fund your next feature and to eat. And they just over time stopped performing. And then around 2017, when Amazon first started dropping their rates, it just felt kind of like a nail in the coffin. And I know it's not dead, but it felt like it was dying. And people kept saying that, especially in the world of streaming, that documentaries were doing better. So somebody convinced me to try, just try one. Just try one. So, I went out and shot this dog rescue documentary. And I fell in love with the people and like their story. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, this can be really cool. Like, I'm learning about these people's lives. I'm learning about dog rescues, stuff that I didn't know. And then at the same time, I'm making something that I can give to a specific audience, which I think is the real strength in documentaries. Because like you pick a subject, your subject is fighting, your UFC, and you have an audience. Like already, you know how to target them, you know how to find them. UFC fans, they're there.
Right. That's been actually a lot of advice for even narrative films, to really make sure that you have a niche market within the narrative film, because that's an easy way to get an audience, because right now we're dealing with so much content. I mean, we just said we don't have Netflix, right? There's so many different outlets for streaming services, so many different movies. There's like thousands and thousands of movies coming out every year. And there's not really a clear audience for seeing a generic type of film. So if you can reach out in an area that somebody's interested in, that's a great way to find that audience. And one thing I wanted to add was, you talked about Amazon. For people who don't know about the finances of some of this stuff, one of the big, for indie stuff, I mean, this varies across the board. Obviously, stuff that's $200 million has a different pipeline and a different kind of financial system behind it. But for indie stuff, a big portion of indie income from a few years ago was Amazon streaming. So it was free to consumers. I mean, this is a big thing, is that consumers tend to want free movies in the sense that they already are paying for streaming services. They're already on all these systems, so they just want to browse through and not do a transaction and pay $3 to watch a movie. They just want to watch something that they have access to. So Amazon was great because it was paying something like 15 cents an hour on streams, which may not sound like a lot of money to people, but it did add up to could add up to quite a lot. Like you could be making many thousands of dollars a month easily at that rate.
For a comparison, a title that I had last month streamed something like 10 million minutes, right? Now, if it would have been in 2017 or 16 when they were paying the 15 cents, I would have made around $100,000.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I'm
And
sorry,
now,
that's a little much. It would have been more like 50, but still.
but it scales. It's a very different scale because now that 15 cents an hour that we're talking about is down to like 1 cent. Or do they even go below that this time? I mean, I think that is one the minimum.
It's 1 is the minimum, 12 is the maximum. It's pretty much impossible to get to 12. I've heard of one film with a perfect CER,
right,
which is a customer engagement ranking, which is how they decide how much to pay you. Predominantly, most filmmakers are under 50%, so you're making 1 cent an hour.
Right. So it's 1/15 of the money. To make it clear, like that's 1/15 of the money that you would have made a few years ago, and the market is more competitive. Right. So there are more films. Yeah. So it's really, the bottom is really fallen out. There was a period where we were working on the release of our film Blood of the Tribades, where we thought we could make a living just on Amazon. If we make 2 or 3 movies a year and they're as successful as this film, we could make a living doing this without any kind of studio, without any kind of investor backing, anything like that, just by putting out movies ourselves, primarily using Amazon as the platform. And then, as soon as that was happening for 6 months or 8 months, they cut the rate to 5 cents and then 3 cents and then 1 cent.
And then they kicked us off.
Yeah.
One of my biggest annoyances, I guess, or like if I got into politics or lobbying, is like with Spotify and music, which was our world before this, they set statutory rates for streaming. So they have to pay a certain minimum for streaming. And we need to do that for films, for, streaming. And like films are so much more expensive than music. And like the rates are less. Then I can make more money streaming a song on Spotify than I can on Amazon for the same amount of time. Like,
oh, wow. I didn't know that.
If you listen, the numbers are exactly that. If you listen to 2 of our songs one time, like you listen to, a song might be
2 like 3 minute
3 minute songs, right? If you listen to something like 6 minutes of our music, we will make the same amount of money as if you watch an hour of our movie. And
it's because the rates were set by Congress or whoever makes laws. I don't know who said it, but
and those
how does
and those rates
work?
are considered extremely low. You'll see people complaining everywhere about the Spotify rate. So I'm not saying that those rates are great, but the point is the rates in film are very bad.
Yeah.
Are very,
they're
very
worse.
Bad. They're worse. And so somebody needs to get in there and lobby Congress or whoever to set a minimum rate. And that way Amazon can't continue to drop and drop and drop. Because they have no reason to keep it high. Like, they want to make more money, so they just take it away from the people that are making the content. And that also drives me crazy with social media. I think we should be paid for our content because Facebook is making billions off of our posts and our brains.
Right.
Like they should be paying us.
Well, have you seen that people are monetizing video on Facebook now, like the way that they did YouTube?
I saw they can give you tips. Like your fans can tip you.
Well, like, no, that's even more than that. It's like, say you have a business page, you have to have, I forget how many followers. It's like 10,000. And then you have to have so many hours of stream content like YouTube. Mm-hmm. And you start making so much per like video second or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, there's another filmmaker that releases movies through indie rights, which I do as well. And he has a very successful YouTube channel. And he migrated over to Facebook. He still does both, but he says he's making more on Facebook now.
Wow, I'm sure those rates will vanish.
By the time we build it up, I'm sure they'll drop them.
Yeah, exactly.
This is sort of the problem is that none of these things are guaranteed to be around, right? So they can just arbitrarily make a decision. And this is what happened with Amazon. Amazon also, Sophia mentioned this, but Amazon also was a platform where effectively you could get any movie on there. So they would have an infinite catalog essentially. And then they started pulling content based on some, we don't exactly know. They're not very transparent about it.
No.
And now they pull more and more and more content. And so, it gets harder and harder to keep your movie on there. And then it also means that because they pay out based on the percentage of popularity that your movie is. So if they pull the lower performing movies, then everybody else's movies kind of shift downward.
And sliding scale.
Yeah,
For the next
exactly. So everybody kind of gets screwed by that. So anyway, these are some of the pitfalls. This is some of the reason we've gotten a little tangential on this, but this is some of the reason why you've done some of the work that you've been doing with documentaries. And so I'd love to hear you talk more about you were saying that you moved to documentaries because it was an opportunity to reach direct audiences and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, yeah, and basically another major thing, and it's filmmaking has always been like this. It's always make the movie for the minimum amount you can make it to maximize profit. Whether you're making $100 million or a $10 movie, it's the same thing. It's just as time has gone on, that price point that you have to make a movie for, especially a low budget movie, has gotten lower and lower and lower. Back in 2010 to like 2015, you could pretty easily make a movie for $50,000, $75,000. As long as it's competent, has some sellable elements to it, you could make the budget back and make a nifty little profit. And then over time, that it just kept getting lower, that bar.
Right.
Then it would be, hey, we can only make money on these movies if they're $20,000, or now if they're only $10,000 and less and less and less.
Yeah.
And so my last couple of narrative films, didn't perform nearly as well as the older ones overall. So I just didn't see anymore how I could, talk somebody into giving me $75,000 and then not making it back. I just couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
And I had no interest in making like really low quality narrative features. So I thought okay, like documentaries, you shoot the interviews, like the production side of it is not nearly as involved. Like I can do these at a quality level that I'm happy with cheaply.
Right.
And honestly, I make these very cheap. I do all the shooting myself. I own all the sound equipment. I do that myself. I occasionally will pay for the interview depending on the person, but usually that's like less than you would pay, a SAG actor. And then, so I'm making them for under $1,000.
Right.
And the feature films, that I feel good about, and then I can profit off those.
Right. That makes great sense. Yeah. I know we had looked at some data from, indie films, essentially mostly micro budget indie films. And it's shocking how little money the average film makes. And a lot of this is generic content. So it's like, I'm going to make a horror movie. It's pretty generic. There's nothing special about it. There's no real marketing force behind it. There's really no way to make it stand out from the rest. And I think a lot of these movies are making like $1,000, gross. Like they're making like no money.
Total.
Yeah.
And that's probably on the higher end.
Right.
It's crazy. I think for people listening, they may not understand how little money there is in a lot of this stuff. So what you're doing is obviously very smart, because you're basically setting yourself up for success, because you have something that doesn't cost a lot. So there's not much financial risk. The only risk is your time and energy, which is still a risk, but not the same kind of risk. And you're also doing special interest kind of work. So you have there are X number of people who are gonna gravitate toward the thing that you're doing, right? That's
absolutely, like, it's just, like I said, it's keeping the costs down very low, because they can, I've done 20 documentary features in the last year, which sounds like a shitload, but out of the 20, probably a little less than half of them really didn't make money.
Right.
I didn't even recoup my time on them. But the whatever 12 or so 52%, 55% that do succeed do well enough that I can I've been able to just live off those this last year. Yeah, but I still have to put them out fast. I've when I started, I was doing like 2 to 3 a month. Now I've slowed it down to one every month and a half.
right.
As I'm trying to increase the quality and the range of the audience.
Right. And you kind of have a back catalog now, hopefully all earning, or many of them earning, continuous, even if it's not as high as when they might have come out initially, but you probably have some accumulation of interest in those things. So
and that always fluctuates, so you'll have older titles that are making $50 a month, and then 2 months later it'll make 500, and then there's the switches between SVOD and TVOD. So like SVOD is like the subscription base. So I used to do much better off that. But like I started pulling my library titles over to TVOD, and I'm actually making a little bit more on those now.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So people
that's
pay
transactional.
People pay like $1 or $3 to rent.
Yeah.
Or
I set it.
Yeah.
I set it at 99 cents for the rental and $1.99 for a purchase. So like you can purchase it for $2.
Right.
And I found it a pretty good, like not as good as the subscription when they first come out, but if you have a title that hits hard on subscription, an indie title, on average, you got about 90 days, like high. Right. And then after it starts falling off new release status, they're gone.
So what are some of your, I know, but what are some of your most successful titles? Because I think people might like to check out some of the stuff you've been doing.
So the first one I ever did was the dog rescue one, and that did really well. I've had some since that have done better, but it did really well. It's what opened my eyes, like, okay, this can work. Then I did we interviewed these two guys for a Bigfoot documentary called Don't Call Me Bigfoot, and that just like it killed. Like we were streaming like 2 million minutes a week just on Amazon. And when we started getting on other platforms, it's like doing it close to that or a little lower, but like it did like 3 months of that movie pretty much made my year.
People love Bigfoot.
Yeah, they do. And the guys that we interviewed for that told us about this convention in Big Bear that was for aliens. So we were like, well, if this was fun, let's do an alien one. So we went to Big Bear and just basically like, cold called all these speakers there and just got a bunch of interviews and put that together. And then that did really well. Not quite as well as the Bigfoot, but close. And then one of the interviews that we did for that was with this French guy. And he gave this awesome interview, but it was really long and I couldn't include all of it in the other documentary. So I decided to do like a shorter, like hour-long documentary just on him. Right. And I kind of threw it together. Like I did the interview. I think I did the edit of that in like 2 days. I had low expectations for it because it was just one person. I wasn't sure about the material. Put it out. It's called Alien Contactee. It's been my biggest documentary earner ever. Like,
wow,
that's awesome.
Like it's killing it. Yeah,
very cool.
I'm waiting for the report for this month because like it just keeps going up. Like usually your first month's about the peak, and then it'll like say you make $2,000 first month, you'll make $1,700 or $1,500 the next month, and then maybe $1,200 after that. But this one just keeps like. It went up about 40% in the second month. Yeah. And maybe another 15 the third.
That's super cool. Yeah.
Do you I actually don't know this. Do you do a lot of advertising for these? Like do you do like Facebook ads and stuff for these specific titles?
Yeah. So I have a pretty like intensive marketing plan. So whenever I finish the movie, I start making my promotional material right away. So I'll do like 30 very short, like 15 to 45 second clips that I'll use for Instagram, Pinterest. Man, if filmmakers don't know about Pinterest, get on Pinterest and do video ads or just even videos without the ads. They do really well. Anyway, Pinterest, Twitter, and then I have a company account, a couple of company accounts, and then a filmmaker account. But I try to leave them off my personal. A little, like I do some, but for the most part, I do them through all my businesses. But
so that's just through organic reach, like you're posting the videos, you're tagging it. Yeah, so you're not paying.
And then I do some paid, but not a lot. Like I said, I have maybe 25 titles in my library, and I spend around $200 a month on ads.
Right.
I usually have like three $1 ads running on my new releases for 90 days. So like a movie comes out and I'll boost the trailer $1 a day. Unless it's delivering really, really well, I might boost it up a little bit. But so I do that for, I usually have about 3 of those running. And then like, depending on what's performing well, if I want to give it a little boost, like I may do like, $50 here, $20 there on this or that. And mostly Facebook. I do Facebook and YouTube mostly now.
Yeah. We never saw much success with like the Facebook ads for our stuff, but it might just be us.
Well, it's one of those things. I can sit here and talk about how, I got my, my video views costing 0.003 cents. That's great. So many people saw it, but is it really translating?
Right.
Honestly, I can't tell you. Which is why I haven't like jumped in and spent a lot more. Because when you're doing these third-party platforms, there's no way to track it. You can't really. The only thing you can track is like a biddy link or something like that. But yeah, so I feel like it helps, but not enough to. I put in less than, way less than 5% of what a movie makes, and no more than that.
And for anybody who doesn't understand, like a lot of this stuff is really is sort of a snowball. So in the sense that like a movie that's popular on Amazon then gets recommended to more people and becomes more popular. So really the goal is to get that like snowball rolling.
The initial popularity.
So, even a few views in those early days that you get from Facebook ads could potentially, we don't know, they don't publish their algorithms, so we don't know the exact rules, but like early on, a handful of views or a handful of reviews can contribute quite a lot to the ultimate success of the movie if that snowballs correctly, so it's it's tricky. Yeah.
And I think with advertising, with paid advertising anyway, I think the trick is you have to really zero in on your audience. Like it can't be any kind of broad. Yeah. Like even on the Bigfoot thing, yes, I was targeting Bigfoot users, but I had to get way more specific. Like what do these people do? They hunt. They like the woods. And then you start thinking about marriage status and age and gender. That was a very male-centric title. So I very rarely targeted females. I did some, but very few. And the more laser focused you are on that audience, the more those things can pay off.
So I think the lesson here is for anybody who thinks they just want to be a filmmaker and they can just show up on set and direct a film. This should help you understand that many of the roles of filmmaker include marketing, learning about the audience targeting for Facebook ads, and spending time researching all kinds of stuff like this. So yeah,
I know. What's sad is ever since I've been doing the YouTube channel, which I really enjoy it, but like I don't talk about movies. I don't talk about filmmaking. It's business. Like that has become, and it's so essential. The build it and they will come days are just like they're just gone. That it's a myth. It doesn't. Like you have to bring the audience in. Yeah. And since I've been seeing a lot of other filmmakers' movies over the last year, around the same levels, the under $100,000, and seeing the numbers that they're returning. And there's so many of those movies that they're good. Yeah. Like they're really good. They're not. It's not just like low budget crap or just. It's really good. And these guys put 2 years of their life, like toiling away, working hard. They got money that they'll never be able to pay back, and those things are making, $100 a month.
Yep.
Yeah. And they're good.
That's the thing with it is like, because the price of cameras and lenses and everything is all coming down while starting to look really great in the last 5 years or so. Like digital cameras look great. So the cost of everything has come down, but you still need a crew to do like a nice narrative film. You still need some people to work on it, so there's no way to really do it free. You can do it very cheaply, but it still costs something to do. And like you said, like 2 years of your life, like most of our films were 2 years of our life, Yeah.
And plus, when you're first starting out, you might have 1 or 2 projects in you where you can beg, borrow, steal most of the crew, most of the favors. But you get on like project 5 or 6, that's it.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
We're done asking for the freeze. Like we have our crews that work thankfully very cheaply with us, but we never pay anybody below minimum wage. Like it's just not, something I'm willing to do anymore.
Yeah, I feel the same.
So, so that, like I was saying, it keeps the budget already in the thousands at that point for a couple of days.
Yeah, just for a couple of days, and try to shoot a narrative feature in 2 or 3 days. There are people that do it; it can be done, but it's just not the kind of
10
movie
is my minimum. Yeah, 10
Yeah.
days is my minimum for a feature.
I just not the kind of movies I want to make anymore.
I agree.
I have done it. I mean, I actually did a YouTube video about it because I did these 1 day features. So I told people how we did them. This is how you could do it. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying that if you get in a pinch and like you absolutely have to, or you're hired to do it, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
But
maybe that's a good segue to talk a little bit about your YouTube channel, because I think this is actually, you have a lot of really valuable videos there. It's a lot of the type of stuff we've been talking about. If you're interested in this type of stuff, I think you have a lot of really smart, well thought out, concise presentations of ideas that are not necessarily obvious or intuitive, like things that you've learned, through this process that are very informative. I think are really cool. So
well, thank you.
Yeah,
I think, and not to be self-aggrandizing or whatever, but I think what separates me from a lot of people that do those types of videos is the sheer amount of experience I have. Like there's all kinds of filmmakers on there. They'll talk about, well, I've done 300 commercials, or I've done this many shorts, but like I've been in the trenches, making, selling, getting feature films distributed for 20 years. So like I feel like that. So and my experience is all on the lower budget range, which
Right.
is also mostly what I talk about.
right.
And I think that because I see so many of these guys that have hundreds of thousands of followers, filmmaking gurus, and they've done 2 or 3 features, if that, and like not even very successful ones. Like they're not actually making money on the exhibition of their films. They're making money from their filmmaking channel.
Right.
It's also that there's a lot of the misleading stuff. So I had written this book on crowdfunding, and one of my motivations for writing that book was because all of the crowdfunding advice was being given by people who they're like, let's study Amanda Palmer's model, who's somebody who comes to the table with hundreds of, maybe not hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands of fans who are going to support everything she does. That's not really applicable to people like us who are just like, I have, 20 friends and like family, and I want to try to make this thing. And I think like a lot of what you're doing really does speak to the independent filmmaker in ways that are not like everybody's still being like Paranormal Activity made all this money, or like Blair Witch, like you still
Anybody
see
that
this
talks
stuff.
to me about stuff from 20 years ago,
like-
I'm like, look at the industry today. Even 5 years ago, like we were saying before, the model is different, because money has come down and down and down. So it's like you can't bring up Blair Witch, which had an incredible marketing budget and like incredible marketing in general. You can't bring that up now and say it applies to anything that we're doing.
Right.
But people do it all the time.
And you're giving advice based on something you're doing this month. And that's what I really like about the channel, because you're like, I'm making these bunch of movies today, and this is advice from today. It's really fresh advice.
Yeah, it's like, and it changes. I started seriously doing the channel 6 months ago. I've had a YouTube channel for 10 years, but I never did anything with it, upload trailers. But anyway, so I started doing this 6 months ago, and I watch a couple of those videos, and the advice is out of date. Like it does, and especially right now, it's like we're on this like accelerator. It's just like everything is changing. I mean, I did 6 months ago. I was making nothing from TVOD, like, less than $20 a month across, 10 older titles, like nothing. But last month on my older titles, I made like $1,300.
Yeah, wow.
On TVOD, and those all older, like retired titles. I mean, granted, there's a lot of them now, but it's different. It just changes so fast.
Yeah, I think that's a really key thing is we're also, I mean, I know you run at least one kind of Facebook group, and we're also both in a bunch of different Facebook groups about distribution, about indie filmmaking. And it's amazing how much people want to give advice. They're like, oh yeah, you should be able to make money from festivals. Like we had this run in 2012. The point is, a lot of the advice, people are talking about experiences from like almost 10 years ago. And like what we're saying, an experience from 6 months ago isn't even good anymore. Like it doesn't even tell you anything anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been a big believer in, like dogmatic thinking, as far as filmmaking goes, because it's always been fluid. It's moving faster now than it used to, but there's always shakeups like this.
Right.
It happened from film to VHS. It happened from VHS to DVD, from DVD to digital. Like those when videotapes came out. I mean, it just changed everything. You know, and all the film guys at the time were like, "Oh, this is gonna ruin the industry."
Right.
But so things if you're going to, I mean, I think it's the same for any occupation, but really in filmmaking, if you're going to do filmmaking, it's all about change. Right. Whatever's working today is not going to work tomorrow, and you have to be willing to learn new stuff and find new ways to make money on the movies. And the days of just doing straight exhibition, on the movie and living off that, I think it's gone, or it's almost gone.
Well, that's another thing that's really interesting with this pandemic is like, are there going to be any theaters when we come out of this in like 2022? Or is it just going to be like Netflix and Disney own a couple theaters and show their stuff and there's nothing else? I think we'll still have our couple repertory theaters in big cities that I love. I don't think those are going away.
Movie theaters will probably exist because so many studios are dependent on them to exist. But
that the studios can buy
change.
theaters again. That just changed recently that they're allowed to own theaters because it was like a monopoly for a long time. Like they couldn't have the exhibition side and the production side, and that changed like this year. So like Disney can just buy up whatever they want, or Netflix can, and so I think it is like in that exhibition side, it's changing as well. And of course, that stuff kind of trickles down a little bit to the indies, not so much, but
it does. But of course, their model is different than our model, right? So, in that, I see a lot of people who cling. They just get bitter and want to cling. This happened in music with us too. They want to cling to the old model. They're like, why aren't people buying my CDs anymore? I'm like, the consumer does not want your CDs. Like they want, a change. Like why aren't people buying physical media? And there's a physical media market, like there is, we do sell some physical media.
If you do nice Blu-ray, there's a market for very small market for like nicely put together packaged Blu-rays.
Which, maybe isn't worth it when you do.
No, it's like a couple hundred. Like it's not thousands, but you can sell a couple.
But, there are people who want to cling to that because they're like, well, I make the most money on this old model. So I'm mad that people are shifting to a new model, but you have to follow what the consumers want, right? I mean, you have to follow what the platforms are doing. You have to follow what the consumers want. We can fight Amazon. I mean, I can get mad at Amazon all I want, which I am. Don't get me wrong. I'm pretty mad at Amazon.
I do think there needs to be a legal change in how Amazon treats creators and how the internet treats creators in general. And this is why, like Andrew Yang, I think people treated him as like a little bit crazy when he came out with this platform about UBI and like, taxing like Facebook and stuff. But like those ideas are so important to bring into our politics because our minds and our creations are being used by these companies to make billions, and it's not coming back to the artists. That's one of my big my big rants in life is like it needs to come back to the artists.
Creative work is all kind of subsidized, or a high percentage of creative work is subsidized. We always living in LA has been interesting too because we always are like, we know that people aren't making as much money as they seem to be making on certain kinds of things. And you're always like, how is this person, getting by? And then you find out, rich family or married to somebody who has a lot of money or a big job.
That was always the thing in Boston. Right? Somebody always like worked at a university and had health insurance, and then their partner could be the artist, And here it is. It seems like family money a lot of times. Yeah.
And that's like a dirty secret, but it shouldn't have to be a dirty secret. It should be that the system, is shifted to not function that way, where art has to be subsidized by somebody who's who earns a salary or a family money or something.
Well, health
like that.
Insurance is the biggest thing, and and a lot of people are tied to corporate jobs because of that, and only that because it's like too expensive to pay for out of pocket.
So anyway, in terms of the documentaries, there's one that Sophia appears in.
Oh yeah,
I think.
forgot.
That's a rumor.
What is it? It's about micro budget filmmaking. I self-taped. Well, Michael helped. All right. Michael taped me.
I heard him a little bit behind the camera.
Don't give him credit. Yeah.
And I think this is part of what, you trying to be creative during, times like these where you're like, well, if we could kind of outsource the work to filmmakers who want to have a platform to talk about, so for Sophia, she's like, I would like to have a platform to talk about the things that are important to me. And we have the resources to actually, create that piece of content and give it to you and let you do the work to put it together into something that anybody's going to watch. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because that is the hard part.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, you want to talk about that film?
Yeah. So about a year ago, actually, right after the dog one, I was like, what am I going to do next? I was like, well, I'll do a filmmaking doc. And I got a couple of friends together, shot their interviews in an afternoon and put it out. It didn't do very well. But months later, when I started the YouTube channel, I decided to start taking those sections and busting them into smaller clips for YouTube, and then I do like a new intro, and I was like, and it helped feed my channel. So I was like, oh, that's cool. And then about 3 or 4 months after that, I decided I should do another one of these, but maybe take it a little more seriously, like to get some better interviews. And at the time, I still feel the same way, but I was really into wanting to see more things about women directors, women filmmakers. So I wanted to do a micro-budget documentary featuring mostly women directors. That was the plan. Now, this movie didn't exactly turn out like that. So I had like 6 lined up, and basically you're the only one that.
Oh no.
So I ended up having to go out to some other people, and ended up with another. But it turned out well. I'm happy with it.
And what's the title of this one?
It's called Micro Budget Marauders 2, TOO.
Yeah.
2.
Oh.
So it's really clever.
I like it. Well, we're looking forward to seeing
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. Should any day now.
Yeah. Are there any other docs that you're working on that you want to talk about, or do you want to plug?
The one that just came out is called Why We Fight, and it's a documentary on martial arts and how certain people use them to overcome trauma, to empower themselves, and then to help others. So it started out as just a straight UFC documentary. And we were interviewing this guy, and he was okay. But we, at the gym, the lady that owned the gym just had this incredible story. Like she had been, she was beaten almost to death as a high school kid or a grade school. And like she was hospitalized for months, like lost her spleen, like all kinds of like crazy. And then had PTSD from it that followed her all the way into like her, mid to late 20s. Like she was just a mess. And she stumbled in, it sounds kind of like the pilot to Glow. She stumbled into an audition, and it turned out to be for a pro wrestling show called WOW. They were just starting up. And it's the guy that actually created Glow. But anyway, so she had to start training martial arts for that, and then got into Muay Thai. And it gave her this, like she never ran around beating people up or anything like that. She got confident. She was empowered. And she went and created a school to teach women and children martial arts. Again, they don't compete or anything like that. It's just all about feeling stronger about yourself. And I was
great.
Like, that's really cool. And then I interviewed another female boxer, and she had a very similar story. Mm-hmm. And then we just put those two together with another guy, and it turned out really well. Anyway, it hit Amazon today.
Cool. So that's called Why We Fight?
Why We Fight.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. And what's the YouTube channel, just so people can find it as well?
It's called The J Horton, just the letter J Horton, and youtube.com/J Horton, I think.
Nice.
Awesome. And yeah, that's, like I said, that's great advice for, people who are currently in the trenches of this whole mess of filmmaking and trying to figure out how to navigate this system. And, I've been impressed with how quickly you've adapted that advice to the ever-changing landscape of the world. You're not getting it, it's not advice from, like, I made a movie 5 years ago that was successful,
right.
Like here's here, which I see that a lot, so. And
as a closing thought for me anyways, and I haven't given up making narrative movies.
Right.
You know, like the way I look at it kind of now is like the documentary thing is kind of, it's my day job. It's like, it's a really good day job, but it's a day job. And then, you know, once a year, I'll take a little bit of that profit and I'll put it into a narrative feature and I'll try that. And if it fails financially, say la vie, you know, just keep
Right.
moving on with the day job.
But at least you had your creative output from your brain.
Yeah, exactly. Like I still have the thing, like I'm not, like I love making the documentaries, but they don't excite me in the same way that a narrative feature does. It's just a different kind of outlet and, you know, I crave both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been really fantastic. Thank you for joining us. And I think that people listening, you know, probably have a lot of new insight into how the world of filmmaking and the, you know, the changing landscape and the way that you've taken a different approach to some of this stuff than, you know, than other people have. And so definitely check out all your stuff. Check out your narrative films as well. You have Death Day is available still. That's is that your most recent narrative then?
Yeah. I did it 3 years. Jeez.
Yeah.
3 years ago. Yeah. Death Day.
And then you have a bunch of other stuff I know that's available.
Yeah, Monsters in the Woods is one of my favorite. It's a 2012 movie, but it just got re-released. I got it off the Purge list on Amazon, got it up on Tubi.
Cool.
So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Yeah. So check out all the narrative work, the documentary work, and the YouTube channel. And thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.